So like $1,000 put in Domino's at its nadir has a better return than Apple.
Wow. Domino's. We're in the wrong business.
Yeah,
I know.
Bottom fishing is a dangerous game, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Welcome back to episode 44 of Acquired, the podcast about technology acquisitions and IPOs. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. So today, backed by popular demand, we've got Brian McCullough of the Internet History Podcast on the show for a crossover episode. So thank you for joining us, and hello, Brian.
Hi guys. Popular demand? Are you sure?
Yes.
Very sure.
This episode was one of the more popular ones of this year. Did we do the other one this year? Trust me, it's in my top 20 for sure, and I'm over 150 episodes at this point.
Wow, sweet.
Well, you are in our top 5, so
I think that the melding of the format sort of like makes us, all three of us, up our games a little bit, you know?
It does. I think because it forced a little change for us. We were just talking about this before the show, but listeners, Dave and I were talking about how, we do our research for these episodes with Brian, but knowing that he's got such a clear narrative around it, we sort of just have this spew of facts, and we can sort of play the role of, hey, wait a minute, what about, instead of actually structuring the narrative ourselves. Continuing a little bit here about, you guys probably want to know what the episode is about. So listeners may remember the last time we did this, in episode 33 with Overture's acquisition by Yahoo. And today we're going back to kind of a similar time, in a little bit before in 2000. And we're going to be talking about the sort of legendary, potentially the biggest flop of all time, a legend in the world of M&A, the merger of AOL and Time Warner in 2000. So
I don't know that
buckle in, because this is
the word I would use.
Infamous.
Notorious, infamous,
yeah.
Cautionary tale, maybe all of the above.
Well, let's just skip to the end when we all say worst acquisition of all time. That's the end of the episode. Thanks for having me on.
But today,
save the listeners some time.
We're going to be looking at it from the AOL perspective. So was it the worst of all time, or was it brilliant? We'll find out.
Definitely have some thoughts on that.
It's a change in the format where David teases the audience into actually listening to the whole episode.
Cue campy teaser now.
Yes. Well, before we get into it, listeners, I want to mention we've got a Slack that is over 900 strong now. So if you like discussing M&A, IPOs, major tech news that happens, come join us at acquired.fm and join the Slack. We also love reviews, so if you feel so inclined, pop open Apple Podcasts. You actually can pause this episode right now and go and rate us on Apple Podcasts, and it makes a world of difference. So thanks to those of you who have done that, and encourage more to do it in the future. All right, listeners. Now is a great time to talk about a new partner of ours here on Acquired, Legora, the agentic operating system that is redefining how the world's best legal teams work.
Yep. It's sort of obvious that AI is going to completely change the legal industry. I bet most of you listening have dropped a contract into some sort of AI chatbot out there. Legora took that insight and asked the question, what if you really built something with that power from the ground up for the legal industry?
So the founders did exactly what great founders do, operate with obsessive customer focus. They embedded inside a massive law firm for months. They sat with the lawyers just watching how the work really gets done.
And that's how you get features that customers love, like tabular review, where you drop in a folder of hundreds of contracts and it pulls every key term into a grid a lawyer can actually work with. Legora's bet here is interesting. Since it lets each lawyer handle more complexity, any given person can increase the quality of their work and do higher value work. And this means that the pie can grow even as each individual task takes less time.
And they recently launched Legora Agent, offering greater intelligence and performance. The agent lets lawyers set an objective. Then it can handle the planning and the execution and delivery of the final product. Legal teams get to maintain full control and transparency since they're still involved where judgment is required.
And Legora works where you already work. You can use it within Microsoft Word while redlining or drafting. The early Legora numbers essentially speak for themselves. When they have a head-to-head pilot with their top competitor, they win 70% of the time. Legora now has over 100,000 lawyers on the platform from 1,200 legal teams in 50 countries. And crazily, they went from 1 million to 100 million in ARR in about 18 months.
Truly insane numbers. And that is the real test. Plenty of things demo well, but the question is whether a busy associate actually reaches for it during crunch time, or whether a partner trusts it before going into a conversation with a major client. If your legal team wants to check it out, whether you're a law firm or you're in-house at a company, you can learn more at legora.com/acquired and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Now, without any further ado, Brian, would you like to take us into the story?
Yeah, so AOL Time Warner, the notorious Titanic of especially .com era shenanigans. We want to start with AOL because, as I've learned by doing my show, people of a certain age have often said to me, thanks for doing episodes on AOL because I kind of never understood what they did. Which I get, because if you're in a time when the internet's all around you, it's in the ether, then, oh, it was just an ISP. Why are they so valuable? They only ever had 25 million subscribers at their height. So what is that? How is that compared to, having billions of users like a Facebook has? So let's start with AOL and posit that AOL over the course of the 90s was probably the best stock to buy if you were able to buy at its 1992 IPO and sell New Year's Day in the year 2000. Your stock would have appreciated 80,000%. At its height, its market cap was about 150 billion, which was worth more than General Motors and Boeing combined. It was worth more than, obviously Time Warner, Disney, all sorts of people like that. It was estimated that more than 2,000 AOL employees were, on paper at least, made millionaires by AOL stock. So, you talk of Facebook millionaires, sorry, even Microsoft millionaires. AOL made a lot of people on paper, really rich. So AOL, yes, was an ISP.
Back in our day, kids, you used to have to pay for the internet.
And it wasn't fast. And you couldn't make a phone call.
You couldn't make a phone call because you had to dial in over your landline. Cell phones existed, but most people didn't have them. At their height, AOL had 25 million subscribers. That was 2002, so after this merger takes place. But they were accounting for, at various times, 60% of U.S. internet traffic in the 90s. So there were other ISPs, even indie ISPs, but in the 90s, there weren't cable modems. There wasn't broadband. I mean, there was, but most people dialed in, and AOL was the main company that people dialed in with. AOL has a long, fascinating, tortured history going back to the early 80s. Again, I have a couple episodes on AOL that...
yeah, they've got some serious name changes, right? I mean, they didn't start as AOL.
Control Data Corporation, there was The Source. Yeah, it's one man's pivoting is another man's failing at one business and jumping into another. And that's actually, you can look at AOL in two ways. Like, either it's one of the more tenacious and brilliant entrepreneurial stories because they basically lose money for the better part of 15 years, certainly more than a decade. And what they're chasing is the idea of online, but they're so soon and so early that they have to wait for the world to catch up to them.
I think the other interesting thing to point out about AOL is it's not a Silicon Valley company. Its headquarters is in Dulles, Virginia.
Exactly. Which isn't even New York it's DC, but so right. It's not even, because AOL, as we'll talk about, gets into especially Madison Avenue and creating content and Time Warner, obviously, but they weren't even New York based. They were in the middle of nowhere, and everybody at the time always complained about that. Like, going to Dulles was like going to Siberia or something. So again, we're going back to the 80s. It's not till the early 90s when they kind of tie themselves to Microsoft and Windows that they sort of leap to the head of the pack. There's a whole pack here. There's CompuServe, there's Genie, there's Prodigy, there's all these.
And CompuServe, I was on CompuServe. So my dad was a beta tester for CompuServe and for AOL, so he's got free accounts. And I remember being on CompuServe and thinking it was better, but my understanding is that it was like only sort of for the super internet savvy nerds, and AOL was much better at reaching the mass market. Does that feel like sort of why AOL won there?
100%. AOL had the derogatory or pejorative name of training wheels for the internet, but they actually embrace that, and it makes sense. I mean, I've said on the show, like, a lot of people's first email was AOL in a time when you didn't have email unless you were at a college or at work or something like that. But also AOL trained people how to live online. Like, they gave you a screen name and you went into the chat rooms and you did dirty sex chat and things like that. And, you could create an online identity, like, and this is what we should talk about, what AOL's business was. They eventually basically made their money by allowing people onto the web, but they were also trying to curate the web and create this online experience that would like handhold people into it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing. Like, we're kind of making fun of AOL in a lot of ways here for, being a Dulles, Virginia company. Again, nothing against Dulles, Virginia, but not where you think of as a tech hub. But they really pioneered a lot of the paradigms of the internet that are some of the most valuable, companies and products today. I mean, AOL Instant Messenger, AIM, was basically Messenger. I mean, AOL was a lot like Facebook before Facebook.
Can we remember to bring that up at the end? Because actually, yeah, AOL is always about to run out of money. Perpetually, because what they have to do in the early 90s is, they create this, it's called a walled garden. So they go to people like Time Warner and they say, hey, can you give us Sports Illustrated content? They go to, this magazine, that newspaper, and say, hey, we'll pay you, X millions of dollars. Allow us to, republish your articles and your pictures and things like that in our walled garden. And so there's all sorts of times when they get saved by an investment from this company, or like Paul Allen invests a lot and basically tries to take him over in the early 90s, and they poison pill him. Again, coming back to this idea that they were either not really a smart tech company, or they were these insane scrappers that they held on to this idea that online could be a thing, and then positioned themselves that when the tidal wave came, they just rode it, right? I've talked again on the podcast before about reasons why Prodigy dropped the ball, CompuServe dropped the ball, AOL, picked it up and ran with it. But essentially what you need to know is by 1996, essentially, AOL is the primary ISP, but it also has this huge amount of content that is, so what you would do is you would dial in and you'd be on AOL. You wouldn't be on the web. AOL would give you your email. They'd feed you their headlines, again, paying the New York Times to provide headlines, that sort of thing. And then if you wanted to go to the web, then you bring up a browser or you'd go through them. Like it was a channel that you would go to. So it was always something that they were sort of wrestling with. Like, they wanted you to stay in their walled garden, but then they also couldn't help but be most people's first introduction to the web and the internet, right? And they ride this through the 90s,
and they did eventually have a browser in AOL, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, that's a whole nother story about how they double crossed Netscape and signed a deal with Microsoft, and right, and then they had, because they had bought a browser called Booklink, and so, but the point is that people aren't sophisticated in 96, 97, 98. For all they know, AOL is the internet. And so when I say that they're sort of wrestling with this. They want to be, somebody describes it as they want to be the Carnival Cruise Lines for an online experience. So they want to curate it for you. But then at the same time, the reality is that most people getting on the web and doing things like going to Yahoo or whatever are doing it through AOL, and they can't conceptually tell the difference, right?
I literally, I'd love to hold on to this until tech themes later, but like it over and over and over again, the only thing that I'm thinking is bundling and unbundling. Like, it is incredible how, the entire internet, everything that we know as sort of the open web and various different protocols and things on various different platforms are all just bundled within AOL. And they were, they were basically making all the revenue for that for a very long time before we started to unbundle it all into these separate services.
Now, there's some also interesting things about AOL's past, which are not. AOL presented this sort of, Steve Case in his khakis in Gap ads, this sort of wholesome all-American thing. But they made most of their money by originally charging by the hour, and most people were in the chat rooms doing sexy talk to each other. So in the background, that's how they make their money. But also they had a lot of things like accounting scandals where they get sued by even attorneys general, that like you're not reporting. I can't even remember the details, but they're like reporting certain sales right away, even though it should have been, over time and things like that. So they kind of always were playing fast and loose, but you can feel like, again, these are scrappers that are staying alive with this dream of online becoming a thing until it finally is a thing. And it's essentially 96, 97 that it is a thing. And they wake up and they have 10 million subscribers that, 60% of internet traffic is going through their pipes. In 98 or is it 97, you have, You've Got Mail, the movie. Like, again, we cannot underemphasize how much AOL was sort of the gateway for America embracing online and the web and the internet. They're also on the web. They're a portal like Yahoo is. By the year 2000, 4 out of every 5 web users were visiting an AOL property at least once a month. And they start to make real money by 97, 98. So again,
and when you say an AOL property, that's on the web, but something that's owned by AOL outside of the AOL walled garden?
You know what? I pulled that out of my notes, and I don't actually know. But that's what I'm saying, is that they're playing both sides of the fence. So, and we'll get into this, like how they're starting to make real money. Like, they would sell you, okay, be on our AOL walled garden side or be on our AOL.com side. They had all this stuff to sell. Actually, we're going to get to that right in a second. So AOL starts to make real money in the .com era, and no one is making real money in the .com era. So that's one of the reasons why their stock starts to go through the roof. But then the other thing that Wall Street is seeing is like, okay, this internet thing is happening, and the majority of Americans are getting online via their pipes. So what do you want to do? That's the stock you want to be in. There's a Henry Blodgett quote where he says, AOL is the blue chippiest of the internet stocks. And they're actually, they're the first internet company to be included in the S&P 500. Guess what company they replaced? Actually, there could be a million. It was Woolworth. But so, as late as 1998, they're still under a $30 billion market cap. But then, like everything else in the .com era, within 18 months, that's ballooned above 150 billion.
And we've talked about this era on this show before, and you certainly have on your show, Brian. But like, I think it's worth again, as always, just pausing on this, like as late as 1998, AOL was worth, market cap of under $30 billion.
And that was insanely expensive.
And then, 18 months later, they're buying Time Warner, and the combined company is valued over $350 billion. Like, that is how crazy that moment in time was.
Well, let me tell you some more reasons why Wall Street was in love with AOL. What they're looking at is, a lot of analysts called it like a three-legged stool or whatever. So they're getting money from the subscriptions. Again, I think by 2000, they hit 20 million people paying $20 a month, right? And then they're a content platform. In the early days, when they had to go to New York Times and say, we'll pay you $2 million to get your headlines, by 97, 98, they can say to the New York Times, you pay us. If you want to be in our walled garden, we've got the eyeballs, we've got the real estate, you pay us. So they're basically a content platform. That's very lucrative. But the big thing, and this is going to be key to this whole conversation, is that by 97, 98, they're making tons of money on advertising. Because, again, they're basically where everybody goes. You know, we think of people starting their day on Facebook now or, you know, whatever. So that's where your email was on AOL. By 98, 99, that's where your buddy list was on AOL. But this whole concept of people starting their day online, like AOL again sort of like trained people how to do that. So I just did an episode with early Yahoo guy. All of the portals in this time period make money essentially by selling ads to other .coms. The whole .com bubble can be thought of as like just a snake eating its own tail. If you happen to be one of the portals, though, you're the one doing the eating. And if you're one of these venture-backed startups, you're the tail. That's
which is
eaten.
so funny. I mean, the parallels to Facebook are just like jumping off the page, right? That there was that era like 3-4 years ago where everyone was saying that, oh yes, Facebook discovered this magical mobile news feed ad, and they're mostly on this new format that's to install apps, and all the apps are funded by venture capitalists that are just paying money to startups to pay money to Facebook to get this. I mean, it's like hilarious how it's the same narrative around the company 2 decades later.
Let me give you some brilliant examples of that. So here's a .com company called drcoop.com. C. Everett Koop was the Surgeon General of the United States. This is how crazy the .com era is. drcoop.com is a company that IPOs to do health, make a health website, right? I don't know the date of their IPO. It's probably 98, 99, definitely 99, I think. They IPO and raise $85 million for their website. A month after they debut on the stock market, Dr. Koop turns around and basically spends all of that money by agreeing to pay AOL $89 million over 4 years to provide health content to AOL users. So all of the money they raised on their IPO, they turn around a month later and they hand it over to AOL.
Oh my
because
goodness.
Everybody thinks that AOL is where you've got to be. And so AOL in 98, 99 is starting to ka-ching like crazy. Like there's a company, a long distance phone provider called Telesave that pays $100 million. And you know, this is playing off .coms. Like there's a company called Preview Travel that pays $21 million to be AOL's online travel agent. 1-800-Flowers pays $25 million to be the florist. Although I had Jim McCann on the show and he said that worked out very well for them. But AOL can play off Barnes & Noble, who pays $40 million to be the book-selling partner in the walled garden section, versus Amazon that pays $19 million to be part of the AOL.com web portal. eBay ponies up $75 million to be the exclusive auction provider. And it kind of works out for everybody. Like when Dr. Koop's deal is announced, its stock actually leaps 56% in a day. This is the .com era, friend. But everyone believes that they have to be on AOL, just like everyone believes you've got to advertise on Yahoo or whatever. So AOL's in this position to just start banking money. Like all of a sudden they're turning a profit where they hadn't for years, and they're meaningful profit in billions and billions of dollars. The guy behind this era is Bob Pittman, who I don't know if that name rings a bell to you guys. He was one of the original founders of MTV. He became very famous for being the hard driving guy behind this AOL deal making machine.
He was their COO, right?
I think so. Right. We'll get to him later after the deal falls apart. But internally, his team of guys that would go around and shake the trees for these .com deals were called the hunter-gatherers because they, quote, descended on the .coms like scavengers and made them offers they couldn't refuse. And there's a quote where An anonymous .com company says that it was like high pressure, just, boiler room type stuff. Quote, for weeks it was, you're great, you're great, you're great. We want to do business with you. And then one day it turns out that we have to give them every last dollar we had in the bank and 20% of our company. Another .comer says that AOL demanded 30% of her company, quote, and then for good measure, they tell us, these are our terms. You have 24 hours to respond. And if you don't, screw you, we're going to go to your competitor. So listen, these are crazy times. These are fat times for AOL. I want to bring up this idea of culture and AOL being scrappers and doing whatever it takes to stay alive. So why do they stop when all of a sudden they're like in the catbird seat? They seem to be the nexus of this new internet economy, and they're Bob Pittman's army of deal makers, basically drive what is essentially the thing that really makes Wall Street go nuts. So we're going to get into this again later, but everyone thinks that the AOL went away because people stopped doing dial-up or paying for dial-up, and they moved to broadband and things like that. But the thing that we'll see actually has the deal sort of collapse and AOL stock price collapse and things like that is the fact that what made their stock appreciate so much was that they had this insane growth in advertising. And that's where the money was coming from. That's where the actual cash flow was coming from. Sure, it's great to have in the background this recurring revenue of the subscription revenue, but that's not what was actually moving the needle in terms of why Wall Street loves them.
Yep. It was all of these deals they were doing with all these .com startups that were giving them all of their money.
Exactly.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to tell you about a longtime friend of the show, Vanta. AI has scrambled the whole security picture. It used to be that you proved that you were secure once a year, an audit or a static PDF, then everyone would nod and you're done. But in an AI-first world, that doesn't hold up anymore.
Yep, your risk surface changes every week now. A vendor turns on an AI feature or someone writes in a new model without telling IT, and your posture is different than it was last week, let alone at your last audit. Vanta's own research found that around 70% of companies have this quote-unquote shadow AI running with no security review at all.
Right. And that's where Vanta comes in. They're the leading agentic trust platform, meaning they've built the thing that closes the gap. And the way that they close that gap is Vanta Agent. Think of it as a GRC engineer, that's governance, risk, and compliance, except that it's software and it doesn't sleep. It finds the issues, drafts the fixes, and cuts the time that you'd spend on vendor assessments in half.
In half! Which is exactly why more than 16,000 companies today run on Vanta. Companies like Ramp, Cursor, and Snowflake all stay audit ready and catch the risks that crop up between audits across every vendor, every AI tool, the whole environment.
And that's the real value. Trust has to be continuous now, which is why Vanta automates your security, your compliance, and the work to earn and prove trust. We're huge fans of Vanta over here, and literally hundreds of acquired listeners have become Vanta customers at their companies over the years. So you can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/acquired. That's VANTA.com/acquired for $1,000 off, and just tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Well, interestingly enough, to transition here, because they're doing all these deals with these .com companies, they have sort of their ears to the ground, and they can start to see when the money starts to dry up, VC money starts to dry up, IPOs start to go bust. They're the ones that know before anybody else that, listen, this bubble might be bursting. And so
so what from like a sort of macroeconomic perspective, why are David, you may actually know more about this, like why are the VCs ceasing to invest there? So what's the signal to them to stop?
It's hard to say. Again, because we're talking about such compressed timeframes here. If I were to speculate, I think it's probably just that so much money had gone into the system without, real returns. And so you start getting to the bottom of the barrel.
Well, actually, that's it. They got great returns. Again, there's other things I don't have in front of me.
Paper
in my notes,
returns.
Right. But see, for them, it doesn't matter because anything can IPO for a certain amount of time, right? And so once you get past the lockup period, you can take actual garbage public and it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. I was thinking more from the limited partner perspective.
Yeah. But what you said is exactly it, is that when they are taking garbage public, eventually everything is garbage. And enough people have kind of gotten rich enough and fat enough that they're like, you know what, I'm going to sit these out. You know, the seventh pets startup, I'm going to sit this one out. And so that in my personal theory is that was it. It's also a combination of people realizing that the returns on online advertising were not good. You know, the click-through rates, you know, are plummeting. So the actual, so that's always been such an underpinning of things, like, you know, ad rates underpinning. It's sort of like, you know, the plankton in the sea or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a key point too. I mean, I think to come back to it, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it too, is these companies that had been venture funded and then even IPO'd had given all their money to AOL and Yahoo and other portals, and with expectation that would drive huge clicks and huge revenue. And then when it doesn't, then they go bankrupt, and then there's no more money to feed into the system.
Well, there's also, it's the 1999 Super Bowl when I think there were 30 .com companies, or maybe it was 2000. It makes more sense that it was 2000, that, you know, are paying $2 million a piece for your one Super Bowl ad. And that worked out for certain companies like Hot Jobs famously, but then others, you know, you've never heard of again, and they blow, you know, their $2 million of the 10 million that they raised. And listen, there's a reason why it's called a mania. There's a reason why, you know, after a party you have a hangover the next day because you did some crazy stuff. But that was the times. So to come back to this, as I said, they know before anyone else, because they can see this. They can see, well, listen, Dr. Coop's not going to raise another round. So, you know, when that deal is up in 3 years or whatever it is, where are we going to get another Dr. Coop, right? So as early as, and I want to stop and mention, there's 3 great books on this. It's unusual that there's been this many books written about a .com era thing. There's Kara Swisher's book, There Must Be a Pony in Here Somewhere. There's Fools Rush In by Nina Monk, and there's also Stealing Time by Alex Klein. So in one of those, you can see, and there's quotes from internal memos after other later lawsuits. As early as December 98, internal emails show that, like, Steve Case and Pittman and the other lieutenants are kicking around the idea that they need to start thinking about a safe lily pad to kind of land this company on, because they're seeing the bubble bursting. And so this is 98, December 98, but so it's still another 18 months before the bubble actually bursts. So they think about other internet companies, and we'll get into this later, but they seriously consider eBay. But Case was generally sorry. Go
Didn't
ahead.
they like actually have Meg Whitman like waiting in a room or something?
I'll tell that story.
Okay.
But Steve Case was wary of doubling down on another internet company, because that makes sense strategically. If you think the bubble's going to burst, why do another internet company?
2 anchors tied to one another are just going to sink faster.
So he says something like, let's look beyond the internet and, quote, identify companies that have a profound impact on how people get information, communicate with others, which is our core business, buy products, are entertained, etc. So there's major courtships with AT&T, the pre-singular merger AT&T. Disney, that they went hard at Disney, but apparently Michael Eisner was a hard no. And the quote, I think this is from Swisher's book. One of the AOL guys says, we all knew we were living on borrowed time, and we had to buy something of substance by using that huge currency. We didn't use the term bubble, but we did talk about a coming nuclear winter. Well, one of their problems is that they also know that dial-up is a limited technology that's going to be eclipsed by broadband. Again, they're not stupid. As much as they're not maybe, you know, a Silicon Valley company, huge technologists, they know that broadband is coming either through DSL, which people thought would be a thing at the time, but mainly cable. modems. So a lot of thinking went into we should get a cable company, or that's probably why they were talking to AT&T. AT&T had DSL at the time. Another quote from Kara Swisher's book is anonymous AOL guy says, "Cable was the driver of everything. Without it, no deal made sense." So Time Warner is the biggest of the media companies at this point in time. Also, they have a little thing called Time Warner Cable. So if Steve Case doesn't want to do an internet tie-up, he wants something that has more substance. But no one's going to believe if they decide they're going to buy an oil company or something like that, though they could have. They had the market cap to basically buy anything at that point. So what he believes is Time Warner has the content. And remember, they spent a decade believing that content was the thing that would make it online become mainstream, become a thing. And so it's, content is key. How many times have we heard that over the decades? Time Warner has this, Tiffany platinum content going back hundreds of years. And by the way, they have a cable company. I think it was the third largest, maybe the second largest at the time. So I'm going to take an aside here and tell you the story of Jerry Levin and Time Warner. Jerry Levin, the CEO of Time Warner at this point, made his bones through technology. He didn't invent HBO, didn't come up with the idea, but he was the guy behind the strategy of let's deliver this pay channel via satellite TV. He makes his name, rises up through the ranks via the incredible success of HBO. And Jerry Levin believed in technology because of that. And in fact, over the several decades at the company, he continued to try to pioneer technological advances, believing that there's untold new ways in the future that technology is going to be able to deliver content and media and things like that. They invest in the full service network in Orlando, which was sort of an attempt before the web took off to sort of do, what they called 500 channels and, shopping with your remote through your TV and things like that. Time, it was Time at the time before they bought Warner, spent about $1 billion on that. They also, when the web comes around, there's a site called Pathfinder that they throw several $100 million after. I have a lovely episode of my podcast about Pathfinder because it's gone down the memory hole, but it deserves to be remembered for all of the things that it pioneered in terms of trying to deliver media on the web. But it also lost them a ton of money. Around this time, corporate America, there's a watchword. Everyone needs an internet strategy. Disney does the Go network. There was NBCI. There was all these initiatives. If you're a media company, you're trying anything you can do. Barry Diller tries to buy Lycos, or was it Alta Vista? I can't remember. Everyone thinks that you're going to be Amazoned. You've got to come up with a way to either embrace the internet and the web or combat it or something. So you have Jerry Levin, who's always believed in technology is going to change content and media. Time Warner has failed time and time again to come up with an internet strategy. And so in 1999, when the People's Republic of China is having its 50th anniversary and all of the, the politicians and business leaders and it's basically Davos in Beijing for that period of time. Everyone's in Beijing celebrating the 50th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. And Steve Case starts to seriously court Jerry Levin. Jerry Levin thinks this is great. This is going to solve it's going to prove him right that if he can marry the greatest media company in the world to what everyone believes is the greatest internet company, his vision of technology changing media will come true. This is going to be his legacy. There's in the various books, it's a complex courtship. This is where I believe the eBay thing comes in. My theory is that they kept talking to eBay because they were using it as a stalking horse. Like I'm going to open up the Kara Swisher book here. The week before, it might even be the day before, they actually announced the merger, the deal with Time Warner. Meg Whitman and their Goldman Sachs people are at AOL headquarters, and they're in one conference room. This is the main conference room, trying to work out a deal so that AOL is going to buy eBay. In what's called the Malibu room on the opposite end of the floor is Time Warner and their lawyers, and they're working on the deal that's eventually going to go through. So it's a comical scene. This is quoting Swisher. Executives are shuffling in and out, alternatively apologizing to and ignoring Whitman and her team, who are sitting there cooling their heels, wondering what they're not quite sure what's going on. Is this just the way AOL works? They're famously flaky and like aggressive at various times, like sort of passive aggressive almost. And so spending a day there where nothing really gets done, and lawyers are running out of the room and disappearing. And where are they going? They don't really know. They don't know that Time Warner's in the other room. So at the end of the day, Whitman and the team is leaving. She goes into Bob Pittman's office to say goodbye, and she says, quote, "You've got a lot going on here, it seems." And of course, she had no idea. I think it's the next day that they announced the Time Warner thing. But so, yeah, they basically... Now, this is definitely an aside. What if they had done the eBay deal? Because eBay survived the dot-com bust better than everybody.
Huh.
Well, and in large part due to because of PayPal, which of course came later.
And then that's the counterfactual. Would would AOL have been smart enough to have allowed the PayPal acquisition? But if you look at eBay stock, like it goes down some, but then it reaches its height. It surpasses its dot-com bubble height in like 2003, 2004. It's like the only stock that does. Like in a time period when Amazon's down to like $5, because eBay's business basically never dipped. So in retrospect, which we'll get into, buying eBay was the way to go. They should have gone with an internet company.
So I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna come back in tech themes. This is my tech theme here, but this is well, I'm gonna say much more on this later. Suffice to say that eBay was the much better business for the internet, certainly than Time Warner. Well, believe it or not, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. Let's do it. I promised 20 minutes. I'm way beyond that at this point. The deal is announced January 10th, 2000. It's the merger of $164 billion AOL with $83 billion Time Warner. The deal, it's announced as a merger, but the reality is AOL shareholders controlled 56% of the merged company and Time Warner shareholders 44%. So it's an acquisition in all but name. And, I actually remember very vividly this happening. And in my memory, I forgot to look this up. Jerry Levin and Steve Case are on Charlie Rose that night. Like they were everywhere. Like Charlie Rose. That's
yeah.
great.
Steve Case vowed that one day AOL Time Warner would have $100 billion in revenue, would be the world's first $1 trillion market cap company. There's a quote from Roger McNamee, the venture capitalist, who says, quote, "Let's be clear, this is the single most transformative event I've ever seen in my career." Kara Swisher has a quote from her book where she says, quote, "In one major move, the two companies had seemingly addressed both of their weaknesses and intensified their strengths. I won't deny that I really believe that, as did many others, many of whom now pretend they never did." So, I mean, this is January of 2000. This is the height of the bubble. What's also happening around this time, the Microsoft antitrust trial has come to an end. It looks like Microsoft's about to be broken up. Who looks like is the new, king of the technology hill? It's AOL of all people. What happens is, so the deal is announced in January of 2000. On 4 days later, the Dow Jones Industrial Average peaks at a level that it would not return to for more than 6 years. On March 10th, 2000, the NASDAQ peaks and at a level that it would not reach again until March of 2015, losing 80% of its value at its low. The bubble bursts. And we'll get into why culturally why the acquisition was a disaster. The merger was a disaster. But again, the reality of it is not that people stopped doing dial-up. Actually, until 2002, the dial-up subscriptions were still growing. It peaked at 26.7 million. The thing that kills this deal is that as soon as it happens, all of those deals that AOL did with the dot-com companies disappear, evaporate. And I'm not just saying that the 3-year deal runs out. I'm saying that the companies are bankrupt and are not going to be sending you any more checks. So essentially, that insane growth in advertising that had so excited Wall Street, at some point, Wall Street was estimating that AOL by 2003 would have more advertising revenue than an ABC or a CBS in television. Like they're thinking this is it. This is the next big thing. Goes away almost from the moment that the deal happens. Culturally, I don't know how interesting this is, but those AOL cowboys move in. They try to tell the Time Warner guys, okay, we're going to run this like a tech company now, and it's like the host body rejecting an organ. Time Warner was always notorious for having these warring fiefdoms of like, I control magazines, you control cable, you control book publishing. They don't
and not dissimilar from AOL. I mean, I think AOL had the internal fiefdom culture too. I mean, you mix two of those together, that can't go well.
Well, and then with AOL coming in as the conquering heroes and being like, we know this new media game better than you Yahoos, but like literally,
sorry, Yahoos, no pun intended.
Yeah, true. There's practical things about culture clashes. Like if in one of the books, like Sports Illustrated just refuses to play ball. Like, we're not going to give our content to you. We're running our own. In fact, Sports Illustrated famously never really gave much to the web anyway. Or think of, there's a story about like Warner Studios after the merger refuses to let AOL take over the Harry Potter website and the online promotion for the Harry Potter movies are just getting going, right? So that's why Warner Studios is... so when AOL says to them, okay, let's take this over, Warner Studios says no, right? And then the thing that AOL wanted the most, like to save their skin, was Time Warner's cable division. Time Warner had Roadrunner famously, which is another thing. Like they couldn't even get Warner to license them the Roadrunner cartoon thing. That's the infighting that is at Time Warner. But so when AOL says, okay, listen, let's brand AOL into your expanding cable internet service, Time Warner Cable says, get bent. Right? So even though they're the acquiring company, essentially, the entrenched power brokers at Time Warner just tells these guys to screw off and basically waits them out until the disaster of the merger becomes evident and get kicked out.
And if you think about like the power dynamics generated by the revenue, like I think AOL's total revenue in 2000, right before the merger, was like 9.5 billion or somewhere in that neighborhood. And Time Warner had a much more narrow price to earnings ratio where they, of that, what were they valued at? Like 150 million or something.
160 billion, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, 160 billion. Like they had real material revenues such that that had to be like a 3x or something, not like a ridiculous multiple like AOL.
Ben, I know what article you found because I found that one too. I think that was adjusted for inflation, but it's even worse. AOL had less than 5 billion in revenue. And
right.
Time Warner
it was that small.
Yeah. And Time Warner had over 25 billion. So, over 5 times as much. And AOL's quote unquote revenue, as we've talked about, was, the snake eating its tail.
So you can see how you're like a Time Warner mid-level exec and you still feel like you have all the power in that organization.
Or you should by right, There's also, think of this strategically. So AOL thinks, well, we'll have a cable company and then that'll solve our problem with the transition to broadband. But then if you're Comcast, why do you want to play ball with AOL now, right? Like if AOL had been independent, they were trying very hard to do things like go to Adelphia Cable or Comcast and say, like, let's co-brand AOL and we'll take, a certain percentage of the monthly fees and you take it, but we'll value add to this. And so, but once they're with Time Warner, then why would any other, broadband player play ball with them, right? So in a way, strategically, that never made sense. But then, like we've been saying, essentially the money just dries up, not again because of the dial-up subscriptions are drying up, but it's all of that ad money. It's all of that, when they could charge the New York Times to deign to be on their screens and things like that, just evaporates in the nuclear winter of the dot-com bubble bursting. And so just a year after the 1 year anniversary of the merger being announced, the combined companies are only worth $147 billion. At the time of the announcement, AOL was worth $160 billion. So essentially, the combined companies a year later are worth less than AOL was at the time of the announcement.
Yeah. And I think they continue to go down from there. They go down below 100 billion, even I think below 50 billion for the combined companies.
Yeah, I had a bunch of stats on that too. The only thing that's relevant, I think, is so essentially it's because the AOL side of the equation is delivering no profits and the revenues are shrinking, and so Wall Street
stole 55% of the company.
Exactly. So the write-downs. $54 billion write-down the company has to announce in 2002, which was the largest ever at that time. It might still be the largest ever. I don't know. $55.5 billion in 2003. The overall loss for 2002, this says, is $99 billion. So I don't know if that's like a fiscal year versus calendar year thing. So basically, AOL, everything valuable about that company is completely an illusion. And Wall Street notices. And so it's announced, what is it, January of 2000? By December of 2001, Jerry Levin steps down. The AOL people are still thinking that they're in charge at this point, so they want to take over the CEO-ship of AOL, the control of AOL, specifically, and actually that's where Bob Pittman really was the guy that thought he was going to take it, because he was feeling like Steve Case would step down at some point. But no, as we know, it went to Dick Parsons. And so Bob Pittman is out by July of 2002. Steve Case finally leaves in May of 2003. September 18th, 2003, Time Warner officially drops AOL from its name. The combined company was called AOL Time Warner officially, but just 3 years later, AOL or Time Warner basically wants to pretend like AOL never happened.
And at this point, they still own the asset. Like they're not saying all in one fell swoop, oh, we're going to spin it out. Like that is still in the company. It's just not doing anything.
Well, you always hear those numbers now and again about however millions of people are still paying every month for AOL dial-up. I mean, it's...
Oh, yeah. I've actually got the number as of Verizon's bid in May 2015. They're still making $606.5 million in dial-up revenue. And I looked up it really actually hasn't shrunk much today. So they're really actually still maintaining that.
Well, there's other assets in there. Remember they bought Netscape, only to
little company called Netscape.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a reason why Kara Swisher's book is called "There's a Pony in Here Somewhere." It's if there's a mountain of shit this big, there's got to be a pony somewhere. So they tried, man.
It was a little pony.
Well, actually, it was a huge one, and I'm glad you reminded me of this. I made a note. AOL Instant Messenger, at its height, I think has over 100 million users. Okay, so like 2003, 2004, people have a buddy list. It's your social graph. Okay. For the research I've done on Facebook, basically they wrote Facebook. They didn't talk to each other. They sat across tables from each other. They're on AIM, chatting at each other. Like that's how Facebook. there's quotes that I found, like, people in charge of AIM and things like that are like, yeah, we had social networking.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
again,
AIM came from ICQ, and which I think AOL acquired ICQ.
AOL acquired. It didn't actually come from ICQ. ICQ was another thing. No one knows why they bought it. AIM, it's an interesting story, was an internal thing that AOL didn't want to do, but like people thought it was cool and they pushed it through.
Why are messaging platforms always internal things? Slack, Discord, AIM, that are like not actually going to be a product, and then shocked. Like, we should be less shocked by now that messaging platforms make good spin out clients.
And AOL should have known, because they're the ones that, I didn't say this before, but the reason they beat Prodigy is because they let people chat. Prodigy tried to, don't do sexy stuff. Like, so AOL
people want to do the sexy stuff.
Just let people talk. The number one thing, if you have if you have a technology product, a new technology paradigm, the thing that will be the first successful company, is the one that just lets people talk to each other. I guarantee you, the first $1 billion software platform or whatever company coming from VR is just the one that allows people to talk to each other in VR the best. With the iPhone,
a couple of real solid bets on that. Yeah.
Yeah. With the iPhone, what are the things that came through? Things like WhatsApp and things like that. Yes, any paradigm in technology allowing people to talk to each other is the safest first bet.
I didn't know that number, the 100 million number for AIM, but it makes sense. Like, I had formative, like, growing up experiences where I, had social, like, the first experience socializing with people, at least people online, and also actually meaningful relationships. Even when we like went to the same high school or middle school, like, we'd chat on AIM until like 2 a.m, and you like get to know people, and you like care about what's in your profile, and you care about away messages. Like, that was before Facebook wall posts, and like you have all these things where like it's social status, it communicates your personality, it the number of people on your buddy list and the way you have it sorted is like representation of strong and weak social ties. Like, that was an essential fabric of life.
Well, I would even say that same thing from the business perspective. My 3 startups were mostly in the 99 to 2005 era. So before even Skype becomes a thing, like that's how we did business, Skyping people all the time. It was if you knew their instant messenger screen name. I'm going to talk to Malik next week, but like, he was famous for that. Like, he would give that, like, that's how, if you wanted to get on GigaOM, we were talking earlier about, promoting startups and things like that. Like, if you knew Malik's instant messenger, and I think Michael Arrington was the same way. Like, that's how
his was Skype, I think. I remember him being a huge Yeah,
but so right, business was done over that. Again, it's the social graph. It's like it was your Rolodex. It was how you kept up with people. Yeah, it was everything. So I need to do an episode on that. I got to track down some AIM guys and have them basically.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's incredible. Like, it was. We joked about it earlier, but like, it was Facebook, WhatsApp, WeChat, like, all of this, Snapchat, like, Instagram. Well, not Instagram. Photos weren't as big a part of it, but like, all of the most important.
Oh, you could trade files. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. You could trade music.
It would fail all the time. Like, it was one of those things that was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot, but we'll see if it actually happens.
But it was, for all that, lots of people, ourselves included, make fun of these, non-technologist cowboys in Virginia. Like, they invented the internet, to borrow an Al Gore phrase.
It's a little, I mean, it's a sad thing to watch, really, because like, Facebook was their opportunity to squander. And I mean, that it's as you sort of study network effects and how people build defensibility around their business, there's some fascinating stories about, I think it was ICQ trying to reverse engineer the AIM protocol so you could chat AIM people from the ICQ client, and these basically engineering wars going back and forth of how could they keep tweaking the protocol to keep the other guys out and keep their network effect to themselves.
There was a whole Cold War between AOL and Microsoft, because you had MSN chat, you had Yahoo chat, and so
that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was. Because as soon
as
Messenger, right, as soon as MSN Messenger would crack the code, AOL would change it, and right.
And you saw these network effect, local network effect dynamics taking place, like just like there is today. I mean, MSN Messenger and Live was the dominant network in a bunch of countries, and AIM was the dominant network in the US. And, it's just like, iMessage and, and Facebook Messenger here versus WhatsApp in Europe.
Well, listen, remember, Steve Jobs famously told us that they were going to open source FaceTime. I haven't seen
FaceTime protocol.
Yeah, I haven't seen that happen.
I think that's actually less of a business decision and more of an engineering decision. I think as the lore goes, the team that built FaceTime was sitting in their row when they heard it for the first time when he announced it on stage, and they all looked at each other like, "What?"
Yeah, I think I heard that too. Yeah. Well, all right. That's I'm sorry I droned on so much, but that I will hand it back.
No sorries.
I will hand the keys back to you guys.
Where do we even pick up?
I know. I mean, well, David, do you want to talk into anything at all? Any more acquisition history and facts, or should we go into the acquisition category? And I can kind of frame that up a little bit.
The one thing I want to add, nothing more on the history and facts of this itself, but is just such a such a fitting coda to this whole story, is history repeating itself, again. And look where we are today. And AOL is owned by Verizon. AOL spun out of Time Warner in 2009. It was valued at just over $3 billion versus the astronomical heights of, nearly 10 years before that.
And that's mostly because they had all this ad tech that they've bought over the years,
Yep. So they get acquired by Verizon. And then on the Time Warner side, the deal hasn't been approved by the government yet, but they are in the process of getting acquired by AT&T. So, there were all these jokes about, the worst merger of all time, and, this tech internet company AOL, merging with an old media company. And here we are in 2017, and both of them are owned by phone companies. Really hard to imagine.
All right, listeners. Now is a great time to thank our longtime friend of the show, ServiceNow. If you are running a large enterprise, AI agents are likely spread across every team, and deploying them is no longer the hard part.
Yeah. The hard part is knowing what permissions they have, what employees are using them for, or what decisions AI is making. AI security for an enterprise at scale is not a small concern. Like, the risks are real.
Exactly. And the challenge with AI is governing it, securing it, measuring it, and making sure that it actually delivers value. That is why ServiceNow built the AI Control Tower.
Yep. AI Control Tower gives enterprises a single place to see, manage, govern, and optimize AI across the entire business. And it works with any AI, not just theirs. Every device on your network, every permission across every system, every AI agent visible and secure in one place.
And ServiceNow can do this because they've spent more than 20 years building the operational backbone of the enterprise, the workflows, governance, approvals, security controls, and institutional knowledge that power how work actually gets done across IT, HR, customer service, finance, and security.
ServiceNow already runs more than 100 billion workflows annually and trillions of transactions for more than 85% of the Fortune 500. So when companies need a place to govern AI at enterprise scale, they're building on a platform at the center of how their business already operates.
And in a future that isn't going to be one AI, it's going to be thousands of AI agents working across every function of the company. But the question is, who's managing them all?
So if you're trying to turn AI ambition into real business outcomes and make it work safely, securely, at scale, go check out servicenow.com/acquired and tell them that Ben and David sent you.
Well, for acquisition category, I think, why don't we actually take a stab from both directions? So let's say first, because it actually was, AOL taking over Time Warner, what kind of acquisition was that for AOL? Our standard categories are people, technology, product, business line, asset, or other. Brian, if I may be so bold as to voice what I think you would say, this is actually an other, because it's not necessarily acquiring, if anything, it's maybe acquiring a business line, but it's like acquiring stability and liquidity. It seems to be what you're applying, like applying an exit strategy.
So see, here's what I would say. Their rationale is that they're buying the business line of the or the technology. It's murky to me what the category is, but they want the cable companies so that they can transition into broadband. That's their rationale. What are they really buying? The assets. They're essentially trying to say, listen, if our stock is ephemeral, we need to convert it into something that'll last forever. Time magazine has been around since the 20s. Warner Brothers has been around since the 20s. Like, so it's the asset of content is king that they were really in their heart going after.
Yeah. Well put. Man, and as a little aside, like if you are at the negotiating table there and you're AOL, how do you keep a straight face through all this and really represent what you're in this for and what Time Warner is getting? We can get into speculating on that later. All right, I'll save it. So then let's take a stab from the other side.
Actually, before you do, David, do you agree with that? What's your take on it?
Well, I think I'd classify it as, I think you guys are totally right, but to me that I'd classify it as an other, because I'm trying to rack my brain here about any other deal we've covered on this show where the rationale for it has literally zero to do with the business. There is nothing going on here except, it's not an asset that's valuable to AOL as a business. It's certainly not technology. It's not people. It's, business lines, sure, but like that's just tons of business lines. They're essentially buying a conglomerate. The only reason they're doing it is to just sort of, save their own, net worth, personal net worth.
This might be a crazy analogy, but the analogy that springs to mind is, how like Dubai and all the Gulf countries, they know that oil is going to run out someday. So they're trying to turn into tourist destinations. Yeah. So that has nothing to do with energy or natural resources, but they're like, yeah, we know. we got to do something that's sustainable,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's going on here.
It's like Snapchat today if they were to decide to go buy land in Manhattan.
Right, or an oil company.
Which famously Zynga did when they bought their headquarters in San Francisco, right in the heart of Soma. It's a huge building right across the street from Airbnb, and is by far the most valuable part of Zynga.
Well, the most valuable part of New York Times is their building. Or did they sell that already? I don't know.
They sold it and they leased it back. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's do the reverse. So you guys go first, then I'll go last. So what is Time Warner thinking it's doing?
So in my head, I'm wondering if they're buying technology, or they think they're buying technology, or if it's really buying distribution, that like say they've somehow missed out on the internet, and they need this way to distribute their content, and it's much better to actually own it than to partner. And by buying AOL, or by getting bought by AOL, then suddenly AOL has all these dial-up customers, they're in all these homes, and they have a brand new channel to get their content to them. I think if I was going to try and rationalize it from Time Warner's side, that's what I would go with.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are just some amazing quotes doing the research here from all the principals involved and from media and observers at the time. But I think it's kind of like, Kara Swisher, as you quoted, Brian, from her book, she's the one who's honest about this. Like, yeah, at the time, like, people were riding high on something, and they thought that this made sense. And, Jerry Levin, the CEO of Time Warner and then CEO of the combined company, he has this quote from when the deal gets announced. I think he said this to, maybe there's a big Washington Post article. I think it was in this. It might have been written by Kara.
Yeah, she was with them at the time.
Yeah. He says, "This new world of valuations in the internet economy is something I accept." So, I mean, he's basically saying, like, this company that's buying us, like, kind of has no business. I don't understand the business, but like, there's the new normal, and that's how people talked back then.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just like, I don't want to be too disparaging of them, because really, as Kara said, like, everybody believed it then, but like, they drank the Kool-Aid. They thought that there was, a new reality there.
Jerry Levin bought the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to make the argument, bizarrely enough, for people, because that's what he thinks. He thinks, he's coming to the end of his career. This is going to be my legacy. I was the guy that was smart enough to hitch this company to the thoroughbreds that are going to take it into the 21st century, right? And so it's not people because he thinks that they're these brilliant businessmen. It's just that they have cracked the code of something that we old media people haven't been able to figure out, and we've been trying to do it for 10 years. So it's people in that sense.
And there's such a great quote from Bob Pittman from AOL, who they're totally like the pushers, like just, feeding more supply into, these guys, via, mainline. He says, he's quoted in the press at the time saying that this is, I think it might be from the same article, the slow moving Time Warner would now, this is the author of the article writing, would now take off at, quote, internet speed accelerated by AOL. And then Bob Pittman comes in with a quote, all you need to do is put a catalyst to Time Warner, and in a short period, you can alter the growth rate. The growth rate will be like an internet company.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
this is like
it's alchemy. Alchemy
Totally.
alchemy via buzzwords, essentially.
Here, David, pass some of that over here.
Totally. This is like when the Beatles period, when they went and lived in India and started doing their heavy drugs.
I mean, it does feel like literally nothing in that sentence is grounded in reality. And you can understand in broad strokes how you look at a tech company and you look at the way that it grows, but zero of that was connected to the intrinsic value and why tech companies get the multiples they do and why they have the growth rates they do. And any discussion of zero marginal cost, it's catalyst.
Well, can I make a point here? In my research of the .com, the bubble generally, what you have to understand is everyone was saying, okay, this is a bubble, 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 from 97 on, and kept being proven wrong. And in my book, there's a thing, where there's quotes from bears on Wall Street or whatever. Eventually everyone just capitulates because you've been wrong for so long. When you're there's no way Yahoo's a $10 billion company. And there's no way they're a 30. There's no way there's a 50. When they're over $100 billion, at some point you just got to be well, shit. So it was, and you know what? There's all sorts of theory about bubbles and things like that. That's when the bubbles burst. When you finally slay the last bear. When people's careers have been destroyed because they've been Cassandras for so long, and it's listen. I've been listening to you and I missed out on a 500% upside,
So I guess I'm buying Bitcoin at 4,600.
I was just thinking this whole time, this is maybe this will maybe transition to what would have happened otherwise. I would have loved to have had a conversation with Steve Jobs during this period and been dude, what do you what's your take on this? I can only imagine what he would have said.
Yeah, I don't know. I have thoughts on that in the sense that because what happened in history is that they waited till the everything exploded. There's ashes on the ground, and they sort of rise up in a place where no one thought, hardware. Where no one thought anything was going to be, everyone was going to be on the web and things like that.
But Steve's laying the groundwork for that all through this period. The next acquisition is at the end of 1996.
And then they have the sort of that hub, the digital hub strategy.
Hub, yep, with the iMac.
So they kind of do ride with the iMac.
It's when this is happening.
Yeah, they do kind of position themselves as we're the best computer maker for this new web era. So,
well, we had a few counterfactuals throughout history and facts about what would have happened otherwise. But maybe a word on what would have happened had these companies stayed independent.
Yeah. So the one thing that I really want to explore here, I think we sort of have we could talk about AOL, but I think my just base assumption there is that it goes to zero or close. But the thing I'm curious about is is Time Warner potentially, do they end up in a way better spot today in 2017 if they hadn't gone through this? Or did this have some kind of positive effect on them that we haven't really talked about
They
yet.
gained some DNA maybe, or some thinking. Yeah, I don't know. I would actually, again, my most recent episode was with a Yahoo guy that, Yahoo's surviving the .com bust. Like, they had the same issue of all of their .com advertisers going away. So where are they going to get their money from? And, they basically Hollywoodize themselves, but they successfully turned the business around. So it's almost like that idea of, if you do have to struggle, you're forced into creativity to find ways. So I'm not saying that AOL would have, succeeded in anything, but maybe if they're desperate, they do take a look at the one thing that's actually still growing, AIM, and try to figure out, it's sort of like, if you've got the parachute, then you just kind of enjoy the ride down, and you're not hustling.
Well, I think we covered the counterfactuals there. I don't have anything else for what would have happened otherwise.
Should we move on to tech themes?
Yeah, let's do it. There's a few that we've talked about, but one that we haven't talked about yet, and that AOL is completely notorious for, is a lot of their rise, and especially in branding and in brand recognition, and then in distribution, is really like one of the earliest internet growth hacks ever, and that's distributing the CDs. And it's doing something that other people aren't, to get noticed and to get distribution, because the point I want to make here is there's a trick, and then the earliest people make out like bandits, and then everybody realizes what's going on, and then it becomes the normal thing, and then there's basically a CPM race to the bottom, and then you're competing against everybody else in sort of a commodity, highly efficient marketplace. Like, if you're buying Facebook ads now and it's not any of the new formats, you're not jumping on whatever the new flashy thing is, like, you can basically, depending on your category, understand what your cost of customer acquisition is going to be. And if you're AOL and you do a very brilliant marketing move of putting these CDs at the checkout where no digital company, and really no company, is doing their distribution, like it's in movie theaters, it's in Blockbuster, like all these unconventional places, and you're giving away something, the benefit of AOL is 100 hours or 1,000 hours for free. Like there's so much that they can give away for free because it's the internet and it's software and it's reduced marginal cost relative to hard goods, that it's shocking to people. And for the first time, they're like, oh my God, this seems like a crazy deal. And no one's ever tried to reach me at this point before. So to me, it's like a lot of times companies succeed because of the initial basically distribution hack or I guess growth hack, but really figuring out how to get in front of people where no one else is getting in front of them.
I love that image of like the Virginia suburbs AOL, 80s and 90s guys being the original growth hackers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, hustlers. That's what I always
hustling.
say.
I mean, they are definitely hustlers.
Yeah. David, you want to do a tech thing?
Yeah. So mine, I mean, I alluded to this a little earlier, but I think this episode for me is a great counterfactual illustration to, I've been thinking a lot about this recently. What really is like the power of the internet, right? Like this merger is getting everything wrong about the internet. And what I mean by that is like the internet connects people. We were, Brian, you were talking about AIM and like letting people talk to one another, and like how do you build value and create platforms on the internet, like as we've learned over the last 20, 30 years, like you let people talk to one another, you let people connect with one another. And AOL, instead of doubling down on that side of what they were doing, they doubled down and they bought a media company. The thing about a media company is it's a manufacturing based, analogy. Like you're not manufacturing physical goods, but you're manufacturing media. Like you're making movies, you're writing journalism, you're making music. Like that stuff you got to pay and make and sell. And like you can build great businesses doing that. Of course, like Time Warner is a great business, not to knock it, but like that's not the internet. works on the internet and why, the promise, the dream of the 90s, right, was, what has been realized now, which is Facebook, Google, YouTube, Airbnb, Uber, Twitch, like Amazon. Amazon originally wasn't this, but now is this. They don't make stuff, like they connect people.
Facebook is a bundle of content and they don't pay for any of it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So what actually succeeded in the next decade? It was Facebook and Google, who essentially make money off of everybody else's content by doing nothing. Well, I mean, they sell the ads. They sell the ads against it, and they're the platform that people find it. Essentially, where do I find my Sports Illustrated article or my whatever? In my Facebook feed, right? Or I, do a Google search for something and some evergreen article from somebody's website, But right, so AOL is going after the content because they think, well, that's the evergreen thing. That's the actual value.
Right. But they're getting in a worse business by doing that.
And the value of that content has been completely undermined because of what the Facebooks and the Googles did. Now, thinking about that, why is everyone getting into content? Why is Apple gonna buy James Bond?
Yeah, I don't understand it, honestly.
So either we're not smart enough to know how the worm has turned, or people are making similar mistakes, or what? Because we're now entering an era where, Twitter and NFL games on, what is it? Is content valuable or isn't it?
I don't know. I guess the only thing I could say, I'm not smart enough to opine. Although, I think back to our episode on BAMTech, which was really fun to dig into. These companies, the Apples, the Amazons, the Facebooks, they're a little bit playing a different game now that they're so big. They are so big. They have so much money. And I think in a little bit they're playing defense versus versus offense. And that's something we've talked about on the show. Like defense in that they want to keep people. They need to keep people on their properties. That's how the merry-go-round keeps spinning. And by going out and buying these super expensive manufactured content, I think the hope is that that'll attract and keep people on the platform. That'll attract people or retain people on the platform, and then they'll stick around for all the stuff they're not making, which is making the wheel go round. But if they move to a paradigm where they're paying for all the content on their platforms, that's a worse business.
I think it might be there's a TikTok thing here, right? Where first everybody's free and open about their content being aggregated because they if you just look at what Disney was doing for the longest time, they're like, well, we create content and then it needs to be viewed everywhere because we're horizontal. And so then they spend 5 to 10 years executing that strategy. And then suddenly the world starts to change and people start locking up their content and vertically integrating. And then you're like, well, okay, now we need to change our whole strategy and own every dollar that comes from serving our content. And it's the aggregators that lose out in that world where the content starts getting locked up. And so when you see a, Apple or a Netflix or any of these, Netflix so much more so because they started as a pure aggregator. You need to make your own stuff because if everything's living in silos, you got to have a good silo.
The history repeating itself lesson is that Yahoo, this is going back to our previous episode we did together. Yahoo and the portals wanted to keep everybody on their pages. Google found a way to make money by being like, no, leave our page. That's fine. We'll still make money off you. So the question actually is that a dead paradigm? Is the open web a dead paradigm? Because if it is, then it's all walled gardens all the way down from here on out.
It's turtles all the way down.
Turtles all the way down. Or is that sort of freedom of digital makes everything a commodity? Something that always comes back and rears its head.
No, I mean, high quality content is very expensive to make and very valuable. And it's only gotten even more magnified in this world where everybody is talking about the same thing at the same time.
They've been saying content is king since the 90s, my friend.
Yeah. Well, but I think it is the promise of the internet, though. I don't know. Maybe we are, talking back into a world where content is the most valuable. But what Facebook and Google, and others proved is like before them, content was king, but it's not king anymore. Like being the platform is king. And that's not the same as distribution. Like it was always content is better than being the cable company, the dumb pipe, right? But being the platform where you control the user experience and funnel and you control attention, that's better than making the content.
So it's the news feed versus I'm thinking about it like rather than me having the choice in my RSS reader of choosing from any of the feeds I subscribe to, Facebook slams something down my throat and I say like, yep, I'll read that. And so if you're,
because
having
then you
an
get
RSS
all your
feed
news from feedback from Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sharp listeners we might have all argued both sides of this at this point.
We might have, yeah. We might have. Tech
well,
views.
but David, I'll give you credit for that point. I've never thought about that before. That distribution is if you're going to make a line and say content or distribution, there's something sort of different in being one of these platforms that dictates where your attention goes.
I'll use another analogy, but before I give up the ghost here, Airbnb, right? Like. The analogy, right, would be like, it would be great to be joie de vivre, like, or a boutique, really high-end hotel chain. Like, you'd do really well, you'd make money. But, like, it's way better to be Airbnb because then you don't have to make the hotels. You don't have to build them. You don't have to run them. But you can access everybody and you can open up all this new supply that didn't exist in the marketplace before. Like, to me, that's like the dream of, the internet. Going and buying, if Airbnb were to go and buy the rights to list, Fairmont or Ritz, Carlton hotels on their platform because it's super premium, super exclusive content, that seems odd.
So again, I'm confused. Are we arguing that content is valuable?
Well, I'm arguing that content is not king. That's what I'm
right.
arguing.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. You guys are still in this game. I'm not.
I withdraw formally.
All right. This is great. This is our first, not first, but in a long time, real debate on Acquired.
Wait, Brian, do you mean because you're an author,
an author now,
a podcaster now?
I'm moving on to being a historian author. Yeah, exactly. No more startups for me.
Then I just withdraw from this specific argument. Then.
All right.
So moving on to grading. The funniest part about this whole thing is since AOL is actually the acquirer, like what I thought I was going to grade, like I came into this thinking like, well, this will be a fun first F, but like for AOL, I mean, it's like an A-, right? Like
that's the question. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And anyone that has access to a Bloomberg terminal, like I do not, I don't know that anyone's done the math on that. So if you're an AOL shareholder and you have 10 shares before the acquisition, before the merger, what is the value of that? And then what is the value, say, of the day that they remove AOL from the AOL Time Warner name? Now, it's got to be less. We know that, right? But how much less? And then if you compare that to the counterfactual of if they had never combined, would AOL have gone to zero? So is it actually a success? There are lots of people. You read these books, you get the quotes from the Time Warner insiders. They absolutely believe this was money laundering. They absolutely believe that they got held up. The AOL Cowboys come in with their hugely valuable stock. They laundered it into this, actually valuable Time Warner stock, and they got away with a heist. Essentially, that's the view of a lot of Time Warner people. But I actually don't know the math on that, and if someone can do it, even if like that 10 shares of AOL, even if it only goes down by 60%, that's better than going down 99%, right? So is it actually a success?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think so. Like it's, in the one sense you could look at, without doing the math on share prices and holdings, if AOL was worth whatever it was, 200-ish billion, before the merger. And then, ultimately got spun out of Time Warner at a value of $3 billion and got acquired by Verizon for $4.4 billion in, 2015 or whenever it was. Yeah. Okay, so that's like a huge loss in value.
But you still had your Time Warner shares.
Right, but instead, you got shares in AOL Time Warner. And then after the spinoff, you kept your Time Warner shares, and Time Warner just got acquired for, is in the process of getting acquired for
right,
about
that's the
$85 billion, I think.
Yeah.
So, you now have joint about $90 billion versus $5. That seems good if you were an AOL shareholder. I mean, of course, you should have just sold at the top and like put your money into, Amazon, but or Domino's Pizza.
Or Priceline, Domino's Pizza, yeah.
That's right. I was going to say, the only way this could be better for AOL is if they had actually bought a growth company like eBay.
That could have been a win. But then, like we said, the Cowboys come into eBay, tell them how to run things. Would they have been smart enough to buy PayPal? PayPal was the real valuable business there. It's got to be an F, guys. There's a reason that people call it the worst merger of all time, because it destroys
so much value. Well, it destroys a ton of value for Time Warner, for sure.
It destroys $100 billion worth of value in the end.
Yeah.
But the problem is that was that all from AOL?
It feels crappy to like consider giving them an A just because like the AOL, management team and shareholders like save their own, personal wealth essentially.
Well, but isn't that what we grade on? Was this a good thing that for the shareholders of the acquirer?
Oh, well, this is good. If shareholders, or is it a good thing for the business? Terrible for the business, good for the shareholders. What do we do?
It's better for the acquiring shareholders than it could have been. It's bad for all of the shareholders involved in the end, because essentially AOL is a sinking ship that just grabbed another ship and brought it down with it,
and didn't sink as far
slower
because of it. Yeah.
Slower.
Yeah. You don't reach the bottom, but you're still underwater for. There's got to be 30 Harvard Business School case studies that are telling us that this has to be an F. If this is the first F, if you're ever going to give an F to something in this show.
There's also got to be some nice case studies and some sort of like business epistemological thought. I don't even know if that's the right word that I'm trying to think of, but basically around that question David just asked, is it the shareholders or is it the business? And David, is there a difference?
Well, corporate behavior of the past 50 years would imply no. But I think if you look back farther in history than that, there absolutely is a difference.
If you can't save the patient, like I shareholder, but like if the enterprise itself dies,
yeah.
So keeping the enterprise itself alive, even in some sort of mutated form, is valuable. Because
I guess
if the patient is dead, they're dead.
Well, it's sort of like, I think what we're coming to here, and we have been for the whole episode, is like exactly what you said, Brian. Like they were drowning and they grabbed a, life vest, and that kept them from drowning. On the other hand, it didn't get them to shore. They didn't catch a boat. They grabbed like a piece of driftwood. I think I'm ready to put forth a grade. I think I give the acquisition a C for AOL shareholders because of that. Like, yeah, you did, keep the business alive. You preserved shareholder value relative to the alternative. But you didn't, relative to what, our two best acquisitions of all time on this show that we've rated thus far, Next and Instagram. Like those are businesses that, to use Bob Pittman's drug pusher like analogy, accelerated their company, their acquirers at internet speed. Like there was no acceleration happening here. There was just buoyancy.
I'm gonna do F. Because if there's never been an F on this show, you're never gonna get a better chance. No one's gonna begrudge you giving this the F.
Like we gotta set a bookend, set the scale.
Listen, yeah, the scale doesn't have any meaning unless there's a top and a bottom.
Well, if it were Time Warner acquiring AOL, absolutely F.
Yeah.
No question about it.
I do have sort of a logical reason for it, which is that again, it's sort of what we said about what happens in the next decade. It's not like being in the magazine business, being in the television business, being even in the movie business was not actually the evergreen thing. They didn't grab something that turned out to be the thing that, look, movie attendance goes down, television watching goes down, magazines are basically on life support, newspapers are essentially dead. Like, so this idea that they jumped into media that would always be valuable was not right. And they were a part of the disruptive force that made that happen. And so this plunges us back in this argument about the value of content and things like that. But I think it's a bad thing because in the end, I would view it as two doomed businesses, or at least two, not doomed, let's say extremely challenged businesses. So embracing each other, and so a successful get out of jail by AOL would have been a better company, an eBay or something, but would have been staying independent, struggling. What's the one thing we've got? It's AIM. So the failure is two companies that were going down, embracing each other. It's bad to me because they clung on to the wrong lily pad. How many mixed metaphors can I do?
Love it.
Well, I was trying to think, what would my F be? And I think, what an A is, a business is dying and acquires something and then can become the most valuable business of all time. So that's Apple. Or I'm sorry, an A plus. And then an F would be a company is the best business of all time and acquires something, and that acquisition manages to sink it to zero.
Bankrupt them. You're right. You're right.
Yeah. And so with our scale, it's almost sort of like logarithmic toward the top, because we often are like, well, we gave Instagram an A, so this thing has to be like a B plus. And like there's very successful acquisitions that we don't give A's. I think I think like I've given, and we may have to go back and revise at some point, but I've given YouTube a C because like it didn't. I was worried about the opportunity cost of focusing on that for Google when it was a break-even business. And so to me, like, while I don't know if I could go F because AOL didn't completely crater their own business by making this acquisition,
but
I don't think Time Warner did, but they're the acquiree.
Yeah,
I mean, right. I'm gonna have to go like D minus because, I think had buying Time Warner destroyed AOL, then it's an F. But it's certainly worse than a C for me. So I'm going to and way, way worse. So I'm going to go like D minus. And I hope to one day find something unacquired where something went from like a Fortune 10 to destroying themselves. Well, I don't hope, but if we ever have an F, that's what it would be.
Like some company that buys something that causes cancer for $10 billion. And yeah. Which actually I shouldn't joke about that. That's probably happened or something. Well, all I want to do is, as long as this show goes on, I'm the one that first gave an F. Let's put that in the record.
Great. You're forever, you can put in your trophy case the original.
We'll change the Twitter bio.
Yeah. The original F. Carve Outs?
Awesome. Carve Outs quick? Yeah.
Yep.
So mine is a book that I'm almost done listening to on audiobook, and I'm going to be really bummed when it's over because it's really nice to have a dose of this kind of reminder in my life every day on my commute. And that is Give and Take by Adam Grant. And it's really making the rounds right now, so I'm sure a lot of listeners have already heard of it or had people tell them they should read it. It's so awesome. It's research-backed descriptions of the behaviors of givers, takers, and matchers in our lives and what the results are of those personality types, and a litany of examples of givers and what they've done and how they've succeeded in their careers. And the super interesting thing that pops out from the book is if you look at sort of a spectrum of people's success in their careers, takers, if you look at a span from 1 to 5, where 1 is not succeeding at all and 5 is succeeding fantastically, takers occupy 2 and 4, matchers occupy 3, and givers occupy 1 and 5. And so it's this interesting dissection of just by being a give first person, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to end up on top or bottom. And it tries to sort of tease apart what are the traits of givers that can, make you someone that ends up ahead in the long run just because you truly care about people and you're truly someone that looks out for the interests of others. And it's just a really interesting. It's interesting to understand something that I never had a mental structure for before, and it's also like just a good little kick to be a better person. And it's nice to have that voice every day. And the narrator sounds like Craig Federighi, so if you like watching Apple keynotes, you'll like listening to this guy's voice.
My Carve Out, which is appropriate for this episode with Brian and the Internet History Podcast, and has been a deeply historical episode. Another book, a great one that I'm also a little over halfway through reading and can't wait to finish, called Season of the Witch. I have that on my Kindle. I haven't read it yet. Oh, you'll love it. It's the history of the dark history of the dark side of the counterculture in San Francisco and what happened to San Francisco in the 60s and in particular in the 70s. The Manson murders, the Zodiac killer, the zebra killings, everything that was really the not often told. We remember the 60s as like peace and love, and it's the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love in the city this summer. And what gets celebrated is the happy, the psychedelics, but there was a true dark side, and it's very, very fascinating to read about, and really shaped the city. And again, like we've talked about on this podcast too, it was the tech movement in Silicon Valley that really came out of the next period in history in this area, and it was shaped by the dark side as well.
Is the tech angle in the book?
I not thus far, and I don't know because I haven't gotten to the end yet. So I'm curious to see. But I'm also started reading another book called What the Dormouse Said.
Oh yeah, yep.
Which you've probably read, which is about the tech angle and the 60s and the counterculture.
I just watched for the first time recently the Zodiac movie, David Fincher's Zodiac, and I had always heard it was a good movie, but I tend to avoid serial killer movies, but that really is a good movie. I was gonna do a book anyway, so I'm not gonna buck this trend. But Claude Shannon, people might know from the book The Information, but also basically the guy that invented information theory. Alan Turing knew the dude, and he shows up at the intersections of all sorts of things with computing and the internet and things like that. I think it's the first full comprehensive biography of him. It's called A Mind at Play: How Claude Shannon Invented the Information Age. The authors are Rob Goodman and Jimmy Soni. I have not read it at all, but it's the top of my list to read. And so I think that since that's my sort of gig is, the history of technology and things like that, I'm eager to learn about the minds that shaped information technology and Claude Shannon. If you've read the information, you should know about him. Basically formulating the theory behind essentially coding and how logic goes into programming and things like that, and taking it from the philosophical into the practical. So yeah, I haven't read it yet, so I can't say that it's great, but I want to know more about Claude Shannon, and you should too, probably.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to talk about one of our favorite companies, Statsig.
Yes, long-time acquired partner. There is a reason why the best product teams at companies like OpenAI and Notion, Atlassian, Figma, Rippling, Brex, and more rely on Statsig, whether they are iterating on their core product features or shipping AI-powered experiences at scale.
Yep. In the crazy speed of today's AI world, shipping fast is just table stakes now. It's basically trivial to build and deploy your app constantly. The real advantage is how quickly you learn what changes actually created value for customers and how fast you can use that signal to guide what you ship next. Whether it's a feature tweak, a pricing change, a performance improvement, or an AI update like a model change or prompt adjustment, they're not relying on instinct. They're measuring what actually moved engagement, retention, and ultimately revenue. And as more teams build with AI, that learning loop becomes even more important. Building with LLMs introduces non-determinism into your product experience. The same input doesn't always produce the same output, and behavior can shift in subtle ways in real-world use.
So doing offline evals will give you part of the picture, but you can really only understand the impact once your product is live with real users, and then you can measure how their behavior actually changes. It's very different than the way that you would ship features in a pre-AI world where you knew exactly what the software was going to do in production.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is where Statsig comes in. It brings experimentation, feature flags, and product analytics into one unified system so teams can ship safely, test rigorously, and directly link what they changed to how users actually behaved. The result is a tighter feedback loop and learning that compounds over time, so you don't just ship more, you ship better.
So if you want to make learning your competitive advantage, whether you're building new AI experiences or just evolving your existing core product, go to statsig.com/acquired to get started.
Well, that's it for our show. One thing I forgot to mention earlier that might be interesting to listeners is, we spent a couple of episodes asking you guys to fill out a survey, and we posted the results on acquired.fm/audience. So if you're interested, we've got some interesting stats on there. 2/3 of our audience is based in the U.S. 24% of you are engineers. 26% of you are currently or have started a startup, and there's loads of other good information in there. So if you're curious about basically Acquired's listenership, check out acquired.fm/audience.
Yeah, and one more bonus/super carve out for the end of the episode is, of course, the Internet History Podcast. As we have told you guys many times on this show, Ben and I are both huge fans, Brian, of your work. It's awesome, and this has been so much, I think, even more fun than last time having you on the show. But
I think we got to know each other. Like, I totally was so geeked to do this because I was like, okay, I think we're good together.
Yeah.
So I knew the rhythms, and so I was like, oh, this is going to be great.
The peanut butter and jelly of tech history podcasts.
Well, thank you. And since I'm going to just basically post this on my side completely unedited, I promoted it last time. I know I got feedback. A bunch of you listened and subscribed, and listen, you can hear that these guys are smart, and they come at it from a different angle than I do. And it's fantastic. Acquired FM, right?
Acquired.fm.
Yeah, gotcha.
On the internet, AOL or otherwise.
Yeah.
AOL keyword acquired.
I was going to say, they used to have keywords. You could buy keywords. Yes. Literally, if you wanted books, you didn't have to. It wasn't Google AdWords or AdSense. It was literally, you would type books into the AOL search bar, and they would give you not web pages, but just what they had in their system in terms of books, and you could buy that keyword. I think I did it once, actually.
Well, guys, that's it. If you aren't subscribed and want to hear more, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast client to Acquired or the Internet History Podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we would love a review on iTunes. Have a great day.